Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Appian Community YouTube channel. My name is Sam Kinnett. I'm a product evangelist here at Appian, and we are thrilled to have you join us for another Learn with Experts live stream. This channel is dedicated to helping you become the best Appian developer you can be, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss any new content that you can help you with your journey. Today, we're here to talk about Appian's newest beta program, Appian 3D Plus. 3D Plus allows you to unlock new ways of deriving value from your digital assets by integrating your 3D models into your data fabric. We're joined by two experts in the Appian product who will walk us through this amazing new tool. But before we get to our guests, don't hesitate to join the conversation. I will be monitoring the chat throughout, so feel free to add any comments or questions you may have. Now, I would like to do a little pre-warning here. I just got word that my building is doing fire alarm testing, so I apologize if at any point I have to jump off, but I promise I will be back. And with that being said, let's go ahead and actually get started today. So as I mentioned, we are joined by two experts. We have Brooks Watson and Kenny Rosenberg. How's it going, guys?
Great.
Thanks for being here. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with introductions. Brooks, I'll start with you, and then we'll jump to Kenny afterwards, and then we'll go ahead and jump into things.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Brooks Watson. I'm a product strategy engineer at Appian, and I'm the lead developer for Appian 3D Plus.
And I'm Kenny Rosenberg. I'm here representing Mastodon Technologies, Appian's longest standing delivery partner. Main reason for being here today is that I'm very excited about the 3D Plus component. Mastodon has a concerted focus on supply chain and manufacturing, which is very related to this component. And we'll take a look at that soon.
Great. Yeah, thanks for being here, guys. I think we're all very excited about the new component and the new capabilities that it has. So yeah, looking forward to this live stream today and learning more and being able to show it off to the rest of the world. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. And Brooks, I'm actually going to start with you. With you being the lead developer on it itself, I thought maybe you could share just an overall of what the new feature is itself, and then maybe some of the beginning items of how to develop and work with it.
Yeah, no problem. So for those of you who aren't aware, Appian 3D Plus is a new suite of components and tools that allows you to bring 3D models into Appian where you can view and interact with them directly. You can also connect them to your data fabric, which allows you to center your enterprise data on a visualization of your physical product. So on the technical side, Appian 3D Plus is comprised of two main objects, which I will give you a brief look at quickly here. So as you can see, for those of you who aren't familiar, this is the design page in Appian. This is where you go to create any objects that are associated with your app. When it comes to 3D Plus, there are two primary objects that you'll be creating. The first is a process model, which you'll use to convert your 3D models into a format that the viewer can accept. And then the viewer is itself a component. And so we'll be looking at how you can implement it into your existing interfaces. With that, let's dive into the process model. As you can see here, I have a blank process model. Setting up a process for conversion is as easy as searching for the smart service, which is called SCS converter, just dragging it onto the process line and configuring it. It only takes 3 parameters. It's very easy to set up. I'm not going to go into detail on them, but essentially you just pick what document you want to convert, give your document a title, and then you choose what folder you want to save your documents to. And with that, you can already begin converting documents. Rather than show you what that looks like, since all you'll see is a green line go across or a blue line go across here, I'm going to take us to the more exciting part, which is the interface. So as you can see here, I have set up our web viewer to display this model of an apartment, right? I can interact with it. I can drag it around. I can zoom into it. And I can also expand it to see individual parts. So setting this up is surprisingly easy. You start with the document that you want to display. We also have this parameter on part selection that allows you to save the information associated with a given part to a variable. we also have the ability to isolate specific parts. So if you only want to load in a particular part of your model, you can do that as well. And you can load in one or as many as you'd like. We also have the ability to color specific parts. That works similar to isolate parts. You can color as many as you'd like. You can change the background color. You can also add markup to the viewer, and you can save that markup or load in existing markup. So just to show you what some of these look like in action, the first thing I'm going to show you is what on-part selection looks like and what I mean by getting information from the part. So I want you to just pay attention to this variable here. We'll dive into it. So once I clicked on this, I was instantly able to get information that is hidden within the model file itself. And this can include a lot of different information. This is up to the source file. But as you can see, we're able to extract a lot of information from it. And you can then use this information, you can save it to a data fabric, and so on. In terms of coloring parts, I've just set up a little button here. As you can see, the frame turned red. I can also isolate the parts so that all we're able to see is the frame. Going back here, the last thing I'm going to show is the ability to create and save annotations. You can leave notes such as this. You can also pin particular notes to a given part. All right, and I've saved that. So what that means now is that if I do this or I delete this, if I click load markup here, I can instantly see that. And what that means is if you have your markup data saved in your data fabric, you can easily jump between version history and see the different reviews that have been associated with a given model. With that, that's a basic outline of the Appian 3D Plus features. I'll pass it back to Sam, who will intro Kenny's portion.
Yeah, thanks, Brooks. And it is really cool. I mean, one thing I noticed as you were going through is you kept mentioning just how easy it is to configure, and it really is. I mean, that's the great thing about working with Appian and all of the new features is obviously this is built on Appian, and so it's as simple as any other smart service you may use or any other component configuration you may use in an interface. It's just adding the parameters in as needed, and then you're done. I mean, you went through that pretty quick of setting it up, and it's as simple as that. It's not a high lead time to be able to get to a really good outcome and result at the end. So appreciate you kind of showing that off. I did have one question for you though, because obviously this is really cool. There's going to be a lot of impact derived from this. What was the inspiration that you guys took for building this component out and releasing it for, I guess, in the initial beta period now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the initial request actually came from one of our customers, Axiom Space. For those of you who are familiar, they have a process that they wanted to upgrade. It was essentially when it comes to the spacesuit that they are building, they have to keep track of every single piece that goes into that. And doing so was very difficult because these pieces don't necessarily have intuitive names. It can be difficult to track all at once any given part, whether or not it needs to be replaced, and there are a variety of different factors. As well as once they identify that a part needs to be replaced, they also wanted to automate their decision on whether or not they would build it in-house or they would contract a third party to build it. So they came to us and asked if this was something we could support. And me, as well as my boss, Sam Merrill, we worked together to build out this POC here, or a POC using this tool, Appian 3D Plus. And once we saw how helpful it was, we decided to flesh it out a little bit more, and now you have Appian 3D Plus.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you guys were able to deliver it so quick. I mean, the impact that it's going to bring. I mean, being able to put a 3D Plus or a 3D component in a viewer within your applications itself is going to be huge. I mean, just being able to interact with it, you're going to get all the tools available, whether, like you said, isolating parts, exploding, adding comments. It's going to be very helpful for the end business user moving forward. And I think one thing that we can do to show that is with Kenny here. Kenny's actually built out a really cool demo around the 3D Plus viewer. And so, Kenny, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and jump into your demo here and take a look at what you've built out and how you've integrated this new component into your Appian application itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned, I'm personally very excited to have access to this. We have a lot of existing clients and prospects who work in a space that would absolutely benefit from having access to this. Axiom Space making the request is not the only use case. They're using it to accelerate their research and development. The example that we're going to walk through here in the demo today is around managing engineering change orders, product lifecycle management, and that sort. But the use cases go much further than that. We have existing clients that work in the manufacturing space that have to do maintenance and repairs. And being able to visualize what is needed in those efforts is very important. The previous state is working all through spreadsheets. We all know that's the starting point before you land in Appian. And it's like being asked to find a needle in a haystack without seeing the haystack. Having the 3D Plus component on screen while you're going through approvals and routing work to people makes everyone aware of what's going on so that you can make the right choices at every step. But like I said, today's demo is centered around engineering change orders. And I promise I'll get to where the component sits in this application as quickly as possible. But I want to give you the context of the problem we're seeking to solve here. I already mentioned we want to be able to see what we're working on as we're working through approvals. And in the space of engineering change orders, we may develop a number of different products as a manufacturing organization, and they go through lots of iterations. Maybe they've already been released out into the public, and we want to troubleshoot issues that have been found, or we're going through a research and development effort like Axiom Space has done. And that means a lot of communication back and forth between the stakeholders who are asking for these changes, the design and engineering teams who are actually creating new iterations of those designs. And as they are going through that process, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of yeses and nos. And as I had mentioned, the previous state is completely blind and without visibility. And so the application here is seeking to streamline that whole process with the effort of making sure that your engineers are making the right choices along the way while you're working towards pursuing cost savings, reducing supplier risk, actually producing the results that you want. And so we're seeing a lot of that reflected on the dashboard. My motto is that you should really get a sense of what the application is seeking to do just by looking at the dashboard. We're seeing a lot of that here. I won't harp on it too much because we're here to talk about the 3D Plus component, but that should be relevant to everyone who comes into this system. The whole concept here is that visibility is important, and that's not just in the 3D models. Now, the best way to show off where the component lives is all the way at the beginning of the journey of a change order. Someone who has a stake in the success of a product or the need to change it wants to create a brand new change order. Now, I'm just going to jump into that creation here, and we're going to see typical Appian guided form process here. We want this to be as straightforward as possible, what you want the user to supply. I've pre-filled some of this information to save us some time. It's going to ask me about the content of the change that I'd want. It'll ask me to check off some items around what is likely to be affected as part of this change, find an existing project to attach this to, and even a part that I'd like to be part of this change request. And you see, once I added the part, we get this additional interface populating at the bottom that includes the component that we're here talking about today, the 3D Plus component. Just as we saw from Brooks with that apartment building model, we see here a circuit board with a lot of different components on it. And it's worth noting that we're not just looking at this and able to do the exploded view and to interact with it. It maintains the structure of the model tree that was brought over from the 3D modeling software. And if it wasn't mentioned already, the component can consume nearly any format through that converter object in the process modeler. I haven't yet run into a situation where a client is working with a format that we can't bring in here. And in both of these examples, we're looking at 3D models. We can rotate them in three-dimensional space. The component also works with DWG files that are more like a PDF, but where the line drawings are broken out into separate components. You can leverage all the same functionality with those as well. What's important to note here is that this is allowing me as a user not only to view the current state of our existing documentation, but to use it as an interaction point while I submit my change. We see here that this is automatically going and pulling the latest version of the documentation. It's worth noting that we are not suggesting that you ask somebody submitting a change order or an engineer working on this to manually go and retrieve the document that they're seeking to interact with, upload it to Appian, go through the converter just to interact with it in this way. We would want to interact with an integration out to a source file system automatically to pull documentation like this, saving time in that way as well.
Yeah, Kenny, that's a really good point and something I wanted to ask you actually, because like you said, a certain part or product or design could go through several different iterations as it goes through its lifecycle management process. And so
Mhm.
that's one good thing to note out is every design change, you are not actually going to have to go back and manually retrieve those files, put them through conversion again, and make sure that they're up to date. Because as mentioned, this is built within the Appian product. And so you get all the other added benefits such as automating that process to be automatically able to pull those documents in, which makes your life much easier because then you know that you're always working with the latest and greatest part design and stuff like that. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you mean when you're talking about integrating this content with your data fabric. In most cases, these designs and documents are going to live somewhere else outside of Appian. Appian is not 3D modeling software. It isn't intending to be. But we don't want to make that process more difficult by adding another step. The whole goal here is to simplify that. And that notion is here present on the screen as well. The default is to pull the current state, but if you happen to be submitting a change order against some older version, we would have access to that version here. Switching would just pull up a different version of the design, and we could bring in a new change order that reflects that as well.
Yeah,
Now,
awesome. Now, sorry, Kenny, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
Because I did notice that you mentioned how, and obviously with Brooks showing us earlier, how the converter kind of brings in a document from an external source, converts it, and stores it into Appian. Brooks, for you, I do have a question. Just looking forward, are there any plans to maybe be able to source documents from external systems that aren't necessarily living within Appian themselves after they're converted? Is that maybe a future plan that you guys have for this product?
Yeah, definitely. We want, yeah, I mean, right now, actually, the way it's set up, because it's a smart service, the conversion tool, you could build an integration to any third-party system, pull the document from there, send it over to the converter, and then have another integration that sends it back. So, for example, like Appian actually has an existing S3 integration, so that's like a highly recommended one for those of you that are in AWS-based shops. But yeah, we plan to make it a more of a seamless integration to models.
Yeah,
Mhm.
awesome. Sweet. All right, Kenny, let's keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, that addition will allow us to pull documentation at the moment of need rather than pre-performing the conversion, which could mean, hey, something's been changed over the last few minutes. That will still be reflected in Appian. So just as a reminder, we're creating a new change order here, and we want to input the context within the part that we're requesting a change for. So we want to leverage all the functionality that Brooks has already showed in the component and say we want to select the component that we want to see a change to. And maybe we even want to add annotations, draw a circle around the thing that we care about, maybe add some text off to the side, swap this, whatever we want to say. And then we want to add a new suggestion or request here. And again, I've pre-filled the information to save me some typing here, but we would be able to link the contents of our annotation and the selection to the rest of this request. So if I save this off, this will all progress through an entire approval lifecycle. That way, the engineers that are interacting with these changes see exactly what I've requested alongside the actual component, which piece needs to be changed, and a lot of other information that's automatically known by the fact that we have access directly to the 3D model. And we'll take a look at what that looks like for the engineer side and the approvals as well. We're still going to do the typical Appian stuff, retain all the context we're already aware of. I'm logged in as me, what the upstream management cycle looks like, who's going to approve these things. Leverage all of that you would typically do alongside this new component. Any questions from the audience or the panel around this particular screen? Otherwise, we'll jump forward in time and see what it looks like to interact with an approval.
Yeah, looking at the chat right now, I don't see any questions. So as mentioned, anybody, if you have any questions, just feel free to throw them in at any point, and I'll make sure that either Kenny or Brooks is able to answer them. But as of now, no. So I say let's just keep going and keep looking at what the tool is capable of.
All right, great. So once this gets created, this would progress through passing and tasking this out to the engineering team, load up the documentation in your 3D modeling software of choice, Autodesk, whatever it might be. Taking those actions, again, Appian is not the 3D modeling software. It's going to help us work through our business process that surrounds the changes. And now let's say we're in a future state. The desired changes have been made by the design team, and we're up to the approval step. Now we see all of our change orders here on the dashboard and the grid here, and let's pick one of them to focus in on. And this one we see we're going to get all the context that we need around the project that this change is associated with. In some cases, a lot of different change requests are linked because they're related, either because they touch on the same product, they share parts, maybe they share suppliers. And we're able to know that as part of what the 3D modeling component offers us, because we're able to dig into the model tree and look at the selections. And in that way, we would be able to find dependencies where a user may have been able to point them out in the past. We can do that automatically. We can also do things like leverage the export from 3D modeling software of, let's say, a bill of materials to see all of the different components that go into producing it, and have those documents brought in parallel so that we can produce even more dependable results in that way. So we can say V1.4 and V1.5 share 90% of the same materials according to both the model and the bill of materials. And the 10% outliers, those are changes. And we're highlighting that in a couple different ways here. We can see that I've created a notion of linked changes, and that there might be other engineering change orders, not the one that we're looking at, that are related to this, either because they share parts that the system has identified, or you've created a manual link to say that there's a dependency. And then the other case would be a bill of materials, which is going to help us do things like calculate cost. I had mentioned on the dashboard that reducing cost is one of the main efforts of automating parts of the process like this. We want to be able to take something that is successful out in the market and actually reduce our internal costs, get more reliable suppliers, and actually increase our margins without changing the functionality of a product. And the system here is able to prompt that without having to do the calculations ourselves. And what we're hearing from industry is that that's a big ask of your engineering team to say, you should focus on cost while you're making the change. Your engineers should be focused on the functionality. Now, if the system that's asking them for the change can prompt them with guidance and saying, hey, the change you've just inputted with your design increases cost. Are you sure there's not a different way of going? Or in some cases, I've alluded to it here, to make recommendations that if you have a reliable mapping of the functionality of your parts to costs to supplier risk, which Appian will help do with Data Fabric, the system should be able to help you find those changes. So in the same way that we're able to flag an increased cost due to a part change, we could suggest a functionally similar part to an engineer and say, this is actually more likely to reduce your cost or reduce your risk. And now they, as a human who's going to have a better understanding of what the actual fallout of a change like that would be, can decide whether or not to pursue that change. But it could be a single click to here to say, there's not an existing request to perform this swap, but single click, create it. It now goes through the similar approval path that we would expect otherwise. And we're seeing a calculated estimation of the change in cost due to this change. And this is going to make everyone happy along the way. The engineers don't have to rack their brain about what the fallout of their change is going to be. The approvers are seeing that they're likely to get an improvement both to the design and to their cost. This is exactly what people are asking for. And the 3D Plus component is part of the equation in being able to present this on screen, not only with the context, but it's going to have us backing that data with the model tree, with the bill of materials and things like that. So this is a very cool addition that lives off to the side, but is very much in parallel with the new component.
Yeah, and I think it also just shows the power of a complete data fabric, because you can see here you've been able to successfully link out across that fabric to the different parts and the bill of materials, and you're able to leverage the Appian platform then with that complete data fabric to use other parts to enhance the experience. Like obviously you've shown AI suggestions to be able to automatically determine other methods of design changes or improvements, and then as well as like configuring review workflows and ensuring that you're operating efficiently and that all the work's getting done properly. So it goes to show that by integrating this with a strong data fabric, you're going to get a lot more benefit and a lot more reach with how this tool is able to impact your business overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still the case, again, that the engineers have to go out to the 3D modeling software to create the change. But if I'm sitting in the role of an approver here, I've done all of my work in Appian. I haven't had to go anywhere else, and I'm going to see all of the context, including the design change here. And I promised I wouldn't stray too far away from the component. So where does that live?
Yeah, and Kenny, I'm going to interrupt you before you get back into the component here. Yeah, I really like what you just said there about how you as a reviewer and an approver can live within the Appian product itself. So I don't know if you knew this, like 2 or 3 years ago, I actually worked for Ford Motor Company as a manufacturing engineer, and I worked a lot with different design software, so specifically CATIA. And I'm not gonna lie, it was rough. I mean, I was switching from CATIA software to Excel sheets to an external system. I would kind of wrap my brain around all these different systems, and at times you'd get lost. Things would get lost in translation. Lead time to review workflows would be much longer, and so being able to stay within one kind of interface, one location, not having to navigate between sources and systems, is going to make life much easier. And so I kind of wish I had this a couple years ago, but unfortunately I don't. But glad it's out now at least.
Yeah, I also wanted to chime in real quick and say that was one of the major benefits that we saw while developing this, is that it enables an almost complete digital thread where a user, regardless of what department they're in, whether it's procurement, sales, maintenance, design, they're able to access their product and any relevant information from a single place, right? From Appian. They don't have to, like Kenny said, you don't have to jump between different systems. You don't need expertise on these various systems. All you need to know is learn to understand one platform. And I think that's a really powerful feature of this that makes the product lifecycle management across the entire cycle much easier to handle and manage across organizations and departments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. So to bring us back into the approval workflow here, we're looking at a number of different changes that were requested in parallel. Some of them have already been co-signed on, some of them not, and we're able to expand that. Let's say we're going to take a look at a circuit board here. We're seeing the component again as promised, and we're seeing a lot of the same content as we see in terms of context at the top related specifically to this component. So we're seeing bill of materials again. This is just for this subcomponent. Now this relies again on having a reliable data source and mapping of your organization, which the data fabric will help with. But again, putting it all in the same place is going to help us perform that assessment of whether or not this is a good change or a complete change. And we're seeing, rather than like the initial creation of the change order, because this is an approval, we're getting a side-by-side view. What is latest or current state of the documentation compared to our new or revised state supported by the engineering team that's just been created? This is the newest iteration. Maybe it's the 4th, 5th, 20th, whatever it might be. And we are being instructed to do a check on each line item that was submitted with the change order. Now, this one is saying that we have this effort or a red line to replace a part for cost savings. We have another instance. Maybe this was an AI suggestion that was turned into a change order. Now we're going to leverage some of the features that Brooks has already shown to help make it easier to tell me where to look on this. This is a relatively simple model, depending on what industry you work in, but it could still be easier to find what I should be looking at. So I've put in a couple different ways of getting at that, including clicking on the card itself. It'll just highlight in a bold color where in the model the change should be reflected. It's this component. This should be very easy to side by side. Over here, we're looking at this. We can isolate the parts just as Brooks had shown as well. And we can even do things like leverage the ability to do measurements on these components inside the component here. So we can just switch from the selection tool into measuring distance between faces, and we can do all sorts of things. Come over here, and this will say, hey, that distance is 7.9 millimeters. That'll allow me to do things like perform actual engineering assessments within Appian without having to go back into other software just to do things like this. I don't want to understate the power in that. It may very well be that it's not just a simply visual change that would be easy to spot. These are complex things that people are asking for, but the component here gives you a lot of ability to find what you're looking for. We can slice up the component so we can change visibility on different planes. We can even change the way that things appear to us as the user. If I'm having trouble seeing certain things, I can up the frame rate, I can enable shadows. Depending on the type of model and business that I'm operating in, the tools are here. And it's going to allow me to make a decision pretty easily about whether I'm going to approve or reject this change. Now, on approve, great, we're green and good to go. If we're not correct here, maybe we have some other change that we want seen. Maybe I even need to check on these annotations left behind. Oh, some stuff is upside down. It doesn't look like that was changed on the other model. I want to mark it incomplete, leave some feedback for the designer, send it back for rework. still reflecting on the fact that I did not need to leave Appian to do any of this. And we've been able to short circuit that entire process. The designer made a new change. Our integration reached out to the file system of record, pulled the newest documentation. I can cast an approval, yes or no. It goes right back to the designer if it needs to. And they've maybe spent 5 minutes grabbing coffee before they can sit down and finish up this last change. That might have taken weeks in a different style of operation here. So this is a huge help to organizations. We're hearing people ask for this, just like Axiom Space did. I'm hearing it myself. There's a lot of different ways that this can be used. We've outlined R&D. We're talking about engineering change orders. I don't even think it's completely outlandish to say that this could be used in healthcare use cases. If you're interacting with something that operates in the physical world, that has something that you can get a 3D model of that would be good context to have, you should be using it in your Appian processes, and now it's available. So I'm personally very excited about that. I think it's going to help us reach into organizations we've had trouble with in the past, because Appian's competitors won't be able to bring something like this in. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what other people do with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool. I mean, just sitting here and just watching, honestly, I'm just like amazed at like all the stuff that you can do with the tool, how to integrate it with the platform, get the complete benefit of like a unified platform. I mean, I'm just baffled. I'm just sitting here just like in awe of like, wow, this is amazing. So I appreciate you sharing that demo. It really shows off the new tool and its capabilities in a really good light. So thank you for that, Kenny.
Absolutely.
Now I do know, obviously you were probably one of the first people maybe to get hands-on with this tool. And I know, as you mentioned at the start, you were very eager, you were very excited to get hands-on. Obviously you built out a really, really cool demo here. What has surprised you the most about it? What have you really enjoyed, or what has surprised you the most about working with this new tool within Appian itself?
I think it really does come down to the ease of implementation. The fact that it's 2 components sounds like there's not enough there, but that's all you need. The fact that there's a single node, you drop into a process model, the documentation can just be brought in from anywhere. It's agnostic of format. I have not run into an issue with that. And the component interacts like just any other Appian interface component. It has all of its parameters defined. They do exactly what you would expect that they do. And I will also credit the team they've produced documentation that explains what anything does if there was any ambiguity. And so to prop up a demo like this does not take me very long. It still remains very much low code, but enabling something that's completely different.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And then one other question that I wanted to ask you before we'll check for any last final questions, and then we'll wrap this up. But you being a developer, developer-centric, and obviously working in solutions, what advice would you maybe give to developers? Because obviously this is a new component. Obviously, as you mentioned, it's easy to use, easy to implement. But just overall, it can always sometimes be daunting working with a new component. So what advice would you have to give to developers who are maybe looking to implement this into their own applications? I know you mentioned anybody who works with something in the physical world, if they can get a 3D model of it, can get it into an Appian application. But I guess, do you have any advice that maybe you would like to share, or just working through with this tool?
I mean, the first step is just to get your hands on it. So join the beta program, whatever it takes to get this into your environment. You will find that it's pretty easy. I think that the most powerful piece of it is the selection and saving of markup. There is a lot of information that we didn't look at. I spent a lot of time talking about the way that costs are impacted and made visible as a result of this. There are ways of producing surface area and volume of individual components in the model tree. You can calculate costs based off of things like that live with changes. It's not reliant on things like a bill of materials, and all of that is part of the output of the on selection input. Take a look at everything that is spit out by that action, and that would be the first place to start. Figure out how that is going to be relevant to your process, and you're going to get value.
Yeah, awesome. And I agree. I think just sometimes just getting hands-on is the best way to learn, and just get in there and work with it, and you'll have some fun. So yeah, that's great. Looking in the chat here, I do see we have one question. It's about when can others get access to it. I will actually get to that at the end. So just stay tuned. That's coming up in just a second. But other than that, there are actually no questions in the chat. So either we did a really good job of explaining it, or people are just really excited about it, or both. So thanks to you guys for doing such a good job of showing off the new feature and all that it's capable of. So yeah, thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Brooks, for joining us today. Your knowledge and expertise have been extremely valuable. throughout this last, 30, 35 minutes. And hopefully we can have you guys back in the future for another live stream. So we'll see. But before we wrap things up, I'll open the floor to either of you to leave any closing remarks if you would like. If not, I'll go ahead and close this out with some final comments.
Yeah, I would say if you're being shy and you think of a question later, feel free to reach out to myself or Appian or just Mastodon in general. We've poked at this stuff a lot. We've seen it used in industry. We'll be able to find a way that this can be helpful to you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. And as I mentioned at the start, this is Appian's newest beta program initiative. So if you're interested in getting involved, head on over to our Appian beta program page and community. I think we might be linking it here in the chat soon, so feel free to check that out. To learn more, you'll be able to share your use case, register to get hands-on with the new tool. But the beta program does last until November of this year, so be sure to act fast. Also, with that to close, our next live stream will be on August 15th. And this will focus on the new 24.3 release highlights. So be sure to tune in and check out all the exciting new features that we're going to be releasing in our next quarterly release. And also tune into that one because we may have some exciting updates around being able to use 3D Plus in your own Appian Community Edition workspaces. So that could be exciting. So stay tuned for that as well. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in, Kenny, Brooks, and engaging with us in the chat. It's always a pleasure to talk about anything Appian. And we hope to see you guys again soon next time. Thank you.